Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia. I'm with Terra.do on the learning team, but I'm here today mostly to just pass the mic to Jason, who's going to be leading the panel today, which is an in climate a panel on software engineering. And Jason, that's my quick intro, and I will turn it over to you so I don't take up any more time.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. I am Jason Curtis. I'm going to be running the panel today. We're going to be doing some basically three sections here. We'll have some short intros from our three panelists here. And then I'll be asking them questions for a little while, and then there will be space for all of you to ask questions. So we do have Q&A enabled. Oh, no, we don't have Q&A enabled. Cynthia, can you enable that for us? We'll turn on Q&A if we can, and otherwise we can also take questions through the chat. And depending on how many participants we have, we might also just be able to unmute. But when we get to the open floor time, we'll do that. But we are here to talk about software and climate and give you all an idea of what it's like and different types of forms that it can take, and then answer whatever questions that you have. Okay, so Cynthia, it sounds like we have Q&A enabled. Let me just take a quick look at that. It still says host has turned off QA, but hopefully that's just lag.
All right, let me toy with it. You guys do it, and I'll see what I
Yeah,
can do.
cool. Okay, so I'll start with intros. I am Jason Curtis. I am co-founder of Option Zero, which is a software consultancy specifically focused on helping climate companies. We do fractional CTO work. I came from a combination of climate and tech backgrounds for the last decade or so, and just started really focusing on this software plus climate area with my wife a couple of years ago. And we also are running our course called Software for Climate with Terra.do, which you can learn more about by searching for it. And I guess we'll probably also toss the link in the chat. Yeah, so without further ado, Bill, you want to go next? Let us know what your climate software connection is.
Hey everyone, I'm Bill. I currently work at Stripe. I don't formally work in climate tech, so I'm kind of the oddball here on the panelists. However, as part of my work at Stripe, I was working on a project to enable the millions of businesses that use Stripe to very easily contribute to paying for carbon removal through Stripe Climate. So happy to talk about any and all ways that you can work in climate tech, even if you don't work at a formal climate tech company. Or otherwise in a different field.
Cool, Hannan.
Yeah, hi. My name is Hannan. I am currently a co-founder of Manatee Energy. We develop software to try to deploy heat pumps in a more efficient manner and make it a little more accessible to people who want to decarbonize the built environment. My background comes from the great, beautiful Big Blue IBM. Spent a year there and didn't find the meaning I was looking for and pivoted straight into climate tech, which has been a wonderful journey so far and met amazing people. Yeah, I'll throw it to Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm based in New York. I graduated in 2020 and was working in big tech at Slack. And then I wasn't enjoying my time and decided to take a Terra.do class called Learning for Action. And then I ended up finding a job at Flipturn, and we are a small startup that's building software for fleets. So those are like city buses, like big commercial fleets, all kinds of things. And a lot of them are electrifying right now, kind of because of legislation. So we're helping them manage like all these new problems that they're dealing with. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to our first question, which is, what made you tell us about the like moments where you transitioned into climate, if you did so. And Bill, you can tell us about your near future where you transition even more, or not. Let's take Allison first.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. It was kind of a really long transition because I took a gap year. I just felt really, really burnt out from working at a big tech company. I wasn't learning as much as I'd hoped. And yeah, just like my projects were really small impact. So then I was reading a bunch about climate change in books, and I found the Terra.do classes, And I was also like taking time to travel and just rest. So I think that was really, really great because it helped me better like assess which kind of field I wanted to go into, because I also did the climate farm school. So I was mainly looking at like agriculture or like energy applications. I also took the time to like work with a career coach, and that was really great because she's focused on like climate and like social justice applications for your career. And there's tons of like climate career coaches popping up. And so it's like an interesting new field there. So that helped me because I wasn't even sure I wanted to like continue being a software engineer. I was thinking of just like leaving the industry entirely and going into like policy or something like that. But I was in a call with a friend who founded a climate tech startup, and he was really encouraging me to first like keep using software and go to like a climate tech startup. So that advice is really, really helpful. And I found that going into like into the Slack community, work on climate, and like kind of creating a network of people to talk to, I found like a really amazing community of like places to interview at. So yeah, that's just a little bit about the transition. Would either of you want to go next?
Sure. I can take it. So I'm originally from Miami Beach, Florida, which, as we all know, is going underwater currently. So my whole life has sort of been revolved around environmentalism, and going to school and sort of going to the workforce. I always believed that environmentalism was more of like let's say a non-profitable cause, right? Great for nonprofits, great for policy, but not really good for work. That was my thought coming before, right? I never heard of climate tech before graduating from college. And I remember vividly, almost a year before I graduated from college, I was looking at these price graphs of electric generation. So, gas electric generation was hovering around, I think it was like 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And then you see solar just rushing down. And then it was right at the point where I think it was in 2018 where they crossed of how much it costs to actually generate a kilowatt hour of energy. And when I saw that, I was like, great, this is amazing. Now I don't really sound like the hippie in the room being like, hey, go like create renewable energy, like build it out because it's the right thing to do, when people would usually counter with it's more expensive. I'm like, fair. I really can't convince people to spend more money. But once that sort of inflection point happened and it crossed, I'm like, this is now not an environmental solution, but more of a capitalistic solution. So once I saw that, I pretty much went full into industry. I think 50 people on LinkedIn who worked in solar and different climate tech companies. I said, hey, I would love to learn about what you're doing. Only a few got back to me, but out of the few, one turned into a job where I worked in commercial solar, and now I'm a climate tech lifer, I would say.
Cool. Great to have you. Before we get to Bill, I'm sorry, I want to take a question to our audience. First of all, it's awesome to have you all here. If you can turn on your video, it does help us with our like energy and understanding and making sure that we're like directing our questions towards things that people are actually interested in. So if you can't, that's totally fine. But if you can turn on your video, that's hugely appreciated. Thank you, Bravo. And then my next question for you all, for the audience, is I'd love for you to raise your hands if you are working in climate already. Well, I'll raise my hand. Cool. You can use the raise hand tool or to use your hand in real life. Cool. Got about maybe like 5, 6. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for that. Okay. And now we're going to lower hands. And then when we have our hands lowered, raise your hand if you are hoping to work more in climate in the future.
Oh, I love seeing that. All right.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we're like,
I hope it's every hand. Otherwise, why are you at this panel?
yeah, that's right. Question number 3 is why. Maybe that's a question for the open floor later. But yeah, given that, Bill, do you want to react?
Why am I in this panel? Right.
Yeah, why aren't you? Great. Thanks for the hands. Thanks for the videos.
Awesome. Great. So I'll introduce myself. So I've been working in this industry in software engineering for more than 10 years, mostly in fintech, so financial software. Previously was at a algorithmic trading company, and then also at BlackRock before Stripe. Um, yeah, but to answer kind of my connection with climate tech, I think my perspective on this is that like even if you don't work for a climate tech company, there actually are a lot of opportunities within your current job. Even if you just are at like a normal tech company that isn't related to climate at all, to get involved in your job. And so as an example, like one of the projects I worked on at Stripe was the team I work on is within Connect. So this is our marketplace product. And one of the projects was we made it really easy for people to enroll into Stripe Climate to contribute to carbon removal as part of the onboarding process. And we actually turned this on by default for a huge percentage of people who were signing up for Stripe for the first time. I think this project is interesting because A, it didn't affect conversions at all, and also B, like even if you didn't work for a company that cared about climate, like even if they were totally purely evil and only cared about money, it was still a net benefit to the company in terms of like ROI, right? So I think the reason I'm in this panel and kind of what I want to convey to people is that like even if you work for a company that isn't in climate tech, you can still find these projects that have positive business value that you can sell to your leadership, that you can work on, that also are good for the climate and also are like can find opportunities to contribute in that way. So as an example, like the project I work on, it was like the piece where it was like, okay, contributing to carbon removal. We didn't build the product specifically for that. It was more like, okay, we wanted our onboarding funnel to be more optimized, right? And that is like good ROI for the business in general. And so as part of this, like, my perspective was, okay, my job as a software engineer is to like build this in a very scalable, platformized way so that you can kind of enable different integrations with Stripe. Like we have a lot of like, we call them like Stripe apps, but like, if you're connecting your accounting integration or like, if you have like corporate cards or other things, it was basically this kind of like platform that you could like plug in other integrations like very easily when you were onboarding. And so like your climate contributions are just one out of like these many other integrations, and then so by building it in like kind of a platformized way, it's like checking the box of like, yes, I want to remove carbon is just like one of like many other things that add business value. And if you can like ship that as a bundle, it's very easy to like convince your leadership if you work at like a larger tech company to ship this thing that also benefits the climate without like climate being like the selling point. So I'll give another example, like Facebook. If you work at Facebook, they have a climate science information hub. And so as part of their like general like anti-spam, anti-misinformation framework, they had to write all the machine learning to like detect people's posts and like classify them as spam or misinformation or whatnot. And so some engineer at that company had to come up with the idea of like, okay, I'm gonna, as part of this existing machine learning model, I'm gonna put one categorization of like climate misinformation and then like, direct that towards like, okay, here are like, credible sources talking about climate change and like human caused climate change, et cetera. And then like,
I worked on those classifiers, by the way,
yeah,
in previous life.
Great. And that's like another way that you can kind of contribute positively towards fighting climate change. But again, Jason, I would imagine it's like, it wasn't like you were setting out specifically for climate specifically. It was like as part of like just fighting spam, which is good business value anyway. We can add this on top of this product that you're already building.
Yeah.
So in general, I think the power of software engineering in general, and not just climate tech, is that you have the power of leverage. That when you, especially if you work at a larger company, you might feel like you're a cog in a machine. But the flip side of that is that you have very broad leeway over like impact at a large scale, and so you can look for kind of opportunities to for that leverage as well.
Yeah. Awesome point. I'd love to have that perspective here on the panel because I think it's really easy to have this like big tech versus climate tech, big tech bad, climate tech good sort of vibe. in the climate tech world. I also heard between what you and Hannan were saying, there was a bit of a theme there talking about how you make doing the right climate thing like easiest, cheapest, most available, most lucrative thing that people can do. And software is huge there. I think about the climate tech ecosystem as a whole as being on this spectrum of like things they're like not really ready yet and like need people to just pay the green premium, like take risks, try new things. And then in the middle, there's stuff that's like close to being ready, and there maybe like you can scale up with some early adopters. And then on the other end is like the goal is like this is just the easiest, most right thing to do, and this is what everybody's doing. And software can like get us from A to B and B to C and C to E. Of course, policy helps there also, and all kinds of engagement helps there. But it's just all about pushing everything the next level. So one question that was submitted on LinkedIn for us was, what keeps you up at night? I don't want to say like what. I want to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty of your climate work, and what are the biggest risks that you're thinking about to it? Yeah, thinking about that for a second. Allison, I saw some nods from you, so you don't want to go first? For me, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you please, Jason, go first.
Well, for me, I'm this I'm an independent consultant, and the way that my business works is it sort of lives and dies on the next few contracts, right? And there's sometimes from day to day, I might go from feeling like I have way too much work to having like maybe no work coming up for the next few months. And that's new to me, and that's something that's probably shouldn't have surprised me, but it surprised me a little bit how much it affected my like day-to-day just feeling of like being alive and working. Sometimes you're like, this is great, like next few months are like all set, I'm doing good work. And then sometimes you're like, well, like this job like isn't really in the up my alley, but should I try to take it? Or like maybe there's another job that maybe there won't be any more jobs coming like ever again because the job market is shifting. So there's just like a lot of uncertainty there being this independent consultant position. That's what keeps me up at night. Doesn't actually keep me up though.
Yeah.
And actually, that's the other thing to say about it is that after the first year, it's not that the work got more consistent, but I got better at dealing with it. I'm more used to it.
Nice. So yeah, I could go. I'm trying to think. I think like everyone here in the panel and in the call as well. I think we're always concerned about, will we meet our goals? Will we prevent enough CO2 coming from the earth and create enough innovations so we mitigate, who knows, a fifth of the world passing away, honestly, or a majority of our environment being destroyed. I would say that keeps me up, but I'm going to try to twist and say that also makes me extremely excited to wake up every morning. I swear, and this is maybe me being naively optimistic, but I love waking up every day and doing what I do and saying, okay, I hopefully can be part of that 0.01% that's going to get us to the good outcome in the future, right? And honestly, there were some nights where I'm like, I can't wait to get to work tomorrow. I cannot wait to work on a partnership and like decarbonize a multifamily unit or this many houses. That is like you're putting that one grain of sand into the hourglass. But that's what keeps me up at night, is honestly how excited I am to work in this industry.
Yeah, awesome.
Oh, I can go. Sorry, I had to think for a while.
Yeah.
One thing, it's like also a good thing, I guess. Like it's really exciting, like Hannan was saying. But our company was started like a year ago when it's like right at the beginning of all these like huge fleets shifting to go electric. So they're dealing with like really high electricity costs and like delays in the vehicle manufacturing, or like just stuff isn't charging on time and it's really, really stressful. So there's like a large responsibility on our small team to like be able to like sell to them that like the EV transition is going to work for them and be like as affordable or even cheaper than it was with gas. So I think that just keeps us up, because also like the chargers are always like sending slightly weird like error messages. So we're like have to handle all the different charger brands and like telematics services that we're integrating with. So I think that's been really interesting, and like just having to be on like a 8-person team, like you really just have to be able to jump into anything. So I think that's been interesting. And also like coming from the EV industry and like thinking about how much we have to scale EVs to actually like make a dent in our emissions is kind of crazy, and like how much mineral resources that's going to take. So I've been learning a lot about like cobalt in the Congo and how like people are treated very, very poorly there, and how like the supply chain also currently like takes very little responsibility for the well-being of the people. So they kind of just focus on like getting their mines to operate as efficiently as possible, and like kind of push, I guess, like for example, like 9% of the Congo is electrified, and then all this water is being used and like directed towards the cobalt mines. So at the same time, there's an opportunity by like putting myself in this space to like advocate for change and talk to these companies, because I can be more of like this expert in the field. So I think I'm also trying to like grapple with that and make a positive influence, because I know that we do need to transition this industry to be electric. So yeah,
So it sounds like
those
that's
two.
a little bit of that like overwhelm of like there's lots of things that you feel like could be on your shoulders.
Yeah, so it's
You
hard to
can't
like,
do everything.
yeah, and it's like it's also like the kind of like nothing is perfectly good or bad. So we just have to like try and do as much good as we can and like speak up to make sure there's like this just transition happening, and that the people in the Congo see some like positive impact on all the good that they're doing for the EV transition. Yeah.
Yeah. Bill, do you have anything you want to say there?
Yeah, for sure. So what keeps me up at night is that this year, 2024, 50% of the world population is undergoing a change of regime, an election of some sort. And so, massive policy implications for half of the global population throughout the world. And I think, unfortunately, the trend lately has been towards regime change in democratic countries, towards kind of more anti-climate change, more, let's call it, less progressive towards climate change, politicians. So it's a worrying trend. And I think in general, like one thing that keeps me up at night is like, how do we continue to, be in the correct information space where people can still understand that this is still an issue that you can work on. And also, I think fighting back against like learned helplessness, right? It's very easy to like kind of feel like, you can't make an impact, and like, well, I mean, that's what the oil companies want you to think, right? That it's like, it's not worth trying and we're all screwed, so you might as well just not, do anything. And so I think it's part of what motivates me, even outside work, to, continue to pursue like writing, making YouTube videos, like content stuff in general, is like, I want to inspire people to let like, hey, like, you have the power to make that change, and it's up to you to realize that there are a lot of things that you can do, and like fighting back against that learned helplessness, because I think it's up to us. Like, we are the people that are in charge of our democracies around the world, and it's up to us to make sure that we continue to drive in the right direction.
Yeah. That reminds me of, Hannan also mentioned the dropping nor grains of sand in. Something that really helped me with the keeping up at night portion of the overwhelm of climate disaster is reorganizing how I thought about it in terms of what I think of as a dynamic baseline, which is that you can't think of things as like, we need to keep things the way they are, and if we don't do that, we're failing. Instead, you look to the future and you say, look, if we don't do anything, we have horrendous disaster coming like soon. And so that's the baseline. And the baseline between now and then is this dynamic curve where like things just keep getting worse and worse and more crazy and unstable. And everything that we can do, all of the work that we do to fight climate change and to work on climate resilience is saving people in the future, and making everything so much more, making civilization's chances of survival, not to like put too crazy a point on it, increasing. So, yeah, we have to do in order to get there is like accept at some level that there is this baseline that just really kind of sucks, and try not to think about it too much. Cool. I think we have time. I think I'll do probably one more question before we go to audience Q&A. So this is a great time to start putting more questions. Yeah, Ash, exactly what I'm saying. It's not all or nothing. Everything we do has a small impact or a big impact. And there's just like, you can't really overshoot. You can't be like, that's the other thing. Like, we're not going to work too hard on climate right now, as a civilization. So yeah, there's the Q&A feature that you should be able to find in your Zoom app. If you can't figure that out, the chat is good. And since we have 43 people, I think we'll probably stick to that. When you put things in the Q&A, we'll be able to triage them from there. But yeah, please use that space for your questions, anything you want to hear from people who are working on software and climate, and have transitioned into that. As you can see, I'm trying to keep this like kind of as like real as possible, trying not to run away from the real issues. So you can ask, nice, easy questions if you want, but we're also like really here to give you our real perspective. So use that Q&A. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll also love to add, was pretty amazing to see how many people are here who want to get into climate tech versus how many people are in it right now. Let's see. So yeah, if you have any questions on like how is it to join, or like what's the status of the company, or sorry, the status of the industry, feel free to also make that clear. Or also, do you feel is maybe stopping you? I'm also very curious to hear.
Yeah, you can put that stuff in the chat.
Oh, also, sorry, one more thing. Joining into climate tech and this industry has been surprisingly one of the most welcoming communities I've ever been in. That was a big surprise. Where we sort of, as you said, Jason, have this big goal of like we're all gonna live in the future, at least maybe us or our kids or some descendant or another human. So if we can make that better, that's everyone's shared goal, and so that really broadcasts itself through every interaction I've had in the industry. So
yeah,
that's also a great thing.
Totally. Okay, so this last question from LinkedIn was from Arpit Goel. He was saying, Ajay Banga, president of the World Bank, said, the bottom half of the developed nations does not have high-speed internet, and the bottom half of the developing world does not have constant electricity. So that was our World Bank quote. And so the question is, in the light of these statistics, how are we planning to take software engineering to the most in need? Bill, do you want to take that first?
Sure. I see that Mingxi has a question as well. Folks who don't have a programming technical background will be a good stepping stone. So I'm going to actually answer both these questions with the same answer, which is that software engineering is not about coding. It may seem like it's about coding, and actually, when you start in your career as a software engineer, you often start coding as the primary skill that you are evaluated on, that people hire you for. And that if you get really good at coding, obviously that's the most obvious next step to becoming a software engineer. But I think as you advance in your career, I think what you realize is that the skill of software engineering, yes, coding is a large portion of that, especially in the early stages. But really at least to me, what software engineering really is about, it's about looking at large complex systems and operating in that complex system to achieve some kind of goal. in some kind of optimized way, right? And it's about this like systematically, logically breaking steps down. And the skill of like debugging, right, is to like look at this big complex thing that has a lot of levers and like trying to figure out which levers are irrelevant and which levers are like crucially important, and then spend all your time only on that lever that is the most important lever and not on the not important ones. That's much harder to do than it is to say and to realize. Because you can, anybody who has had the experience of trying to debug some bug has the experience of like, you know, wasting hours and hours looking at the wrong thing only to realize like, oh, actually the real problem was somewhere else. And so the better you get at the skill of like figuring out what is the real problem, executing logical steps and thinking of it in this kind of logical deductive framework, that to me is really what you do as a software engineer. And I think in climate tech, because these are a lot of like technical challenges that you have to solve, whether that's like new technologies, you know, or like making existing technologies more efficient, or like optimizing your supply chains to make things cheaper, a lot of it breaks down into the same skills, right? And so if you can take those skills, I think those are very, very transferable skills to an industry where if somebody does not have that software engineering experience, you know, they might not have had the perspective of like, you know, I need to identify what is the real problem and like work only on that problem. And then so you end up like wasting your time, right? So I think to me, that's kind of the crucial thing that you can do and what you can offer. And so, you know, yes, like a lot of people don't have access to electricity or even internet, you know, but I think the impact that you make is like so much greater than just coding.
Yeah, I love that. Software engineering is not about coding. It's about solving the right problems. Does anybody else want to comment on the? I know Allison, you already mentioned that you spend time thinking about cobalt mining. Did you have any other thoughts on taking software engineering to the most in need?
Yeah. Well, I guess one thing that happened recently, we were like renting EV in New York City to just see what the charging experience was like in Brooklyn. And it took us like over an hour to find a functioning like public charger. And then a few days later, I was also talking to an Uber driver, and he was saying there's this policy in New York City where they have to be 100% electric by 2030, which is like 80,000 drivers. And he was telling me how it's like really, really miserable for them because they're being pushed to, even though they have a gas car at home, they have to spend hundreds of dollars a week to rent an electric vehicle. And then when they try to charge it during their shift, they're spending maybe an hour out of their 12 max hour shift, just like looking for a charge. And it's also crazy because it's like a lot of us live in apartments in New York City. So it's pretty difficult to get approval in your building to like charge or like install a charger. So I think that was a really, really illuminating conversation. And it's something where it's like the policy for New York for like getting EV drivers in rideshare apps versus like their policy to install chargers in the city is like this huge 5-year gap. But what does that actually look like for the lives of these drivers when they're not getting support from the company that's supposed to be like leading them through this transition? So I think instead of like just sitting and like letting that conversation go into my void, I've been like writing about it a lot and trying to like think about what I can do to like think of policies or like pressure another fellow tech company to like do better and actually help their drivers, because they're getting a lot of like green benefits from like saying how great their EV program is, but it's not so good on the ground. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and you can like do that in a bunch of other applications. Sorry. Something else too is just what is it? Yeah, I think the big thing from there, and also Bill mentioned like having a website or like making YouTube videos and writing. I've really learned that like even just a little bit of like learning about climate is a lot more than a lot of people have been doing, just because sometimes anxiety can be so great. So even a little bit that you can do to like share what you're learning and try and like shift people in your direct community is really, really helpful. And I like try and share what I'm learning and then also bring in more of like this ethical component. So I think that's how I'm doing it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. That like the bringing in the ethics is a huge thing. That's what Bill was talking about as well. I think that's a good segue to this first question from the Zoom Q&A, which is from Roy Quintana. He says, as a software engineer, do you ever find the need to upskill toward other areas such as industrial, civil, electrical, mechanical engineering, etc.?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, who knew? I never thought in my entire life I would have to get an or a heat pump HVAC installation license, but now I do, because that is just, hey, the best way to decarbonize buildings right now. Because I say in climate tech, especially, it's pretty unique because it touches the real world, right? In essence, we're trying to mitigate pollution in some way or create a more efficient way of doing something in the real world, because that is what it's affecting in
It's
the
an atoms, it's a molecules problem.
it's exactly like you're going, like, it's not just data, it's not just bits, it's not a bit problem, it's now an atoms problem. It's exactly. So I would say it's very common to, at least in climate tech, I found, to understand like a lot of the more physical world. Like Allison was talking about mining now, who thought software engineers would have to think about how minerals are mined, or Bill with, I'm sure, how carbon mitigation works. So yeah, it's I think it also helps to just have a very curious mind, because a lot of times you get one lead and you're like, oh, this is really interesting, let me try to learn more about this and more about this and more about this. It's like a Wikipedia rabbit hole. But then you learn a lot, and then maybe like in those learnings and those connections that you're trying to make, a solution may come out.
Yeah, plus one. I think one of the reasons I love this career actually is that you have to always learn, right? Like even if you're not in climate tech and only do like pure coding, right? You still need to refresh your skills, learn the new frameworks and programming languages and whatnot every 5 years or whatever, right? And so yeah, I mean that's what I like about this career, is that you have to like learn new things all the time. And if you're working in climate tech, that means learning your industry specific thing, or the specific civil and mechanical engineering skills, or HVAC, or whatever it is that you need at the company that you're working at.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what distinguishes, what makes my particular company succeed or fail at landing and doing a good job with a contract. It's that we come with a lot of background in all different kinds of software for climate. Like I've built energy models. I've spent time at Facebook on large distributed systems. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not. But also we're not afraid to build some hardware if we need to, or find the right people to build the hardware. But even if you're not in climate tech, you're just in tech, a lot of that game of like being a good CTO or anybody who's making architectural decisions for software is knowing the difference between software that's cool because it's cool and software that's cool because it's going to like actually help you, like being aware of the new technologies, following along. We could do entire talks on how to be a successful like lead engineer, and a lot of that would be about learning. Cool. Allison, did you want to talk about that? Or should we move on to the next question? Cool. We also have a question for you specific, Allison. If you want to share the career coach you used, probably LinkedIn is a better place to do that, but you can also drop that in the chat. And then I'm going to move on to number 4 here. How would one go about finding startups and opportunities in the space of climate tech / conservation tech? Is it mostly startups working in this space? Are there job boards you could recommend, or is it mostly finding opportunities through networking? Who wants to take this one first?
I do know there's this one really interesting source for climate jobs called Climate Tech List. If you ever heard about this, it's actually built by a friend of Bill and I's named Steven Zane. I would highly recommend that as a place to start. It indexes almost every climate job that's even out there. What type of stage the company's at, what's the location, how much funding they've had, have they gotten grant money. I think that's a great place to start. If you want a really, I would say, like guerrilla way of finding a job or companies in the space, look at government grant awards or awardees. I found that's really interesting. So these are usually companies who are building an MVP. They got a big grant from the government. It could range from 100,000 to a few $1,000,000, and usually that's a sign that, hey, they're hiring right now. So that usually helps to reach out at the time. You know, the DOE publishes all their awardees every, I think, half a year. That's also a interesting source for jobs or potential leads.
Yeah. The job market is like crazy and rapidly changing right now with like combination of economic changes and AI. The traditional channels are like just pretty much overwhelmed with noise, is my understanding. Definitely recommend maximizing your networking. And you can do that through groups like Work on Climate or My Climate Journey have Slack groups. Terradu has a great community and also upskilling things. In-person connections are great. Yeah, finding like weird hacks of like where can you find data to target people is great too. But it's kind of hard to get your foot in the door these days.
I will add to
Oh.
just mention. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just had one small recommendation to the climate tech cities lists, because they put out Substack, I think like weekly or pretty frequent updates of all the events, usually in person in your city. I use the New York one, and it's really, really awesome for networking, because I think, yeah, a lot of these are startups, and it helps to have this like in-person network to be getting like stand out in jobs. Yeah. That's all, Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, when we say networking, I think what we don't mean is like just show up at events and then like give people your resume. You know, I think it's more about like how do you kind of show that you have the skills to contribute to the companies that you want to work for. And you can just do things, right? Like, let's say if you wanted to work at Hannan's company installing heat pumps, but you have zero experience, like just call homeowners, right? Just knock on doors and be like, do you want a heat pump? Right. And then, you know, build a list of people who want to buy heat pumps, and then call up Hannan and be like, yo, Hannan, I talked to 1,000 people in the Boston area. I have, you know, 100 of them that are warm leads and 10 of them that are like ready to install today. Like, do you want to work with me? I've already sold these people, like, you know, just hire me. That is like way stronger than just like sending a resume into some job portal.
Yeah, I would take that.
Yeah, it helps to come in with like just a little specific knowledge, even in like the in-person stuff. But even like receiving LinkedIn messages or sending them, the best success I had was like asking them specific questions, or yeah, just doing a little extra work.
Like show real interest. Yeah. When I'm as a consultant, it really helps to like you have these early conversations, and if there's a moment when they understand that you have something that you can help them, like you can help you speak their language, and you have something that they want. And sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's great. That's fine too. That's also a successful network potentially. Also, if you're thinking about being independent, I would say read the book The Mom Test. That was the #1 resource that we found really helpful for.
Oh yeah, plus 1 million. That's
biz
great.
dev. Yeah, business development. Okay, I'm going now to. Oh, we have one more. I'm going to go to the chat for a few questions, and then maybe we'll have time to go back to the Q&A or anything else, but we'll see. Arishi says, in your experience, what does it look like for climate tech to effectively engage with other kinds of organizations in the climate space, CBOs, governments, etc.?
I could maybe speak a little bit about this. Another organization I recently co-founded, we call it Laminar Collective, which is a research organization to help bring more transparency and just experience within the heat pump industry, because there are, as Allison said, is a ton of policy that's out there. Governments want things to happen, but there's a disconnect to actually it being deployed or executed, where the markets are like, well, you have these goals and you're not helping in any way, so we actually can never meet these goals. But they try to throw as much money as they can to the problem, or put a lot of public support behind it, but without actually executing on it. Sorry, where was I going with this? Remind me the question.
Sorry, I was looking at other questions.
I just pasted it again. What does it look like for
Oh.
climate to effectively
Yes, yeah.
engage?
So with the Dilemma
Engage with other
Collective,
organizations.
yeah, we found that just by publishing this information out, by doing research on the market and just putting it out there in the ether, a lot of governments have been reaching out to us saying, hey, we love this. You know, we have our internal policy and goals that we want to reach, but we've been stuck, or they try to hire consultants on the side. No offense, Jason. Where it really doesn't give them a good understanding of the market. So just by us publishing information out there, that is actually what led to us founding this company, Manatee, to create software and solutions to the problems that we've found at every corner. So I think it's if you could have that niche or just dive into a problem or a topic and just gather information, not even needing solutions, honestly, and just putting that out there as a source that's easy to read, you will most likely get a lot of attention.
We have some relatively generic software questions, which maybe we can take one of. Let's say, as a developer, if you could have the business team in your company, learn one particular tech stack in a boot camp to better understand your challenges, successes, and day-to-day tasks, what would that be? Does anybody have any inspired answers to this one?
They should learn assembly to know how hard it is to do programming solutions. That's what I would say.
Give them the hardest one.
Give them the hardest one. Like, look how hard it is to just print characters.
That is interesting. Yeah, I've never considered having the non-software folks learn software just to better understand my challenges.
Maybe
Yeah, go ahead.
maybe just like reading API documentation to understand like all the different like components of the product, I think is pretty helpful, and it's a lot more like reading comprehension. But then if you wanted, you could like learn how to send requests and things.
Yeah. Bill, any thoughts on that?
I would ask, like, why do you want them to understand your challenges or successes, or do you need them to, right? Because if you operate, like, if you have a high degree of trust and you operate in a very specialized manner, and you can like kind of navigate work politics effectively, it can actually be effective to just like have them not know what you're doing, and then you focus on what you do best.
I'm guessing they're asking about increasing that degree of trust. Maybe you have other recommendations for increasing the degree of trust.
That's also true. You know, that to me, that reads as like a priority misalignment thing, or maybe they like, or like maybe a communication thing where, you know, there may be some kind of crossed wires. You know, I'll reflect that back. It's like, are you interested in learning about like cold like sales, and like how often do you talk to your like BD team for like how they land clients, right? Or like how often do you talk to you know, your customer support team, etc. So it's a two-way street. But I honestly think, like, you know, not everyone needs to be an expert in everything. I think the empathy is important for sure if you understand kind of like the high level. You know, but to me, that's a symptom of like you mentioned, right? It's like either low trust or some kind of miscommunication. So I would maybe zero in on the like, you know, what is causing that trust gap or like communication gap. That to me, it seems like the symptom there, and not necessarily like they have to understand what it's like to be a coder.
Yeah. Somebody's saying I had a conversation just today about the time I took a short UX course to help me as an engineer communicate better with design. Yeah. So that can be useful sometimes, the cross training. Also maybe one of the more impactful meetings that I ever like instigated was relatively early in my career, when I was like, look, it feels like my team is always really frustrated at this other team that sits like 50 feet away in the same building, and we're all trying to do the same thing. It sounds like they're pretty frustrated with us too. we're all on the same team, right? Like, can we like stand in a room and do a structured retrospective of like, how have the last few weeks been? What's the hardest thing in your job? And you find that like what we found was that like certain parts of the communication channels were just broken. Certain assumptions were just on either side were just broken. And by fixing those, we could like actually enjoy working with each other. And we could even find ways to complement each other's abilities. And so that was one. I'm a huge fan of like open, like retrospective discussions. I think it can make a huge, maybe one of the biggest things that can increase a team's or multiple teams' like happiness and effectiveness. People are asking for book recommendations on the bigger picture of software engineering. The software engineering is not coding. What is it? I think it probably. Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I loved the goal. It is required reading for everyone at Amazon. I don't know if that's still the case. I've never worked at Amazon, but it basically talks about like the idea, like when you're in this like complex system, right? Like how do you make sure you always operate at like the most important parts of that system, and like how do you make sure you always work on the right things. And then so the book is specifically in a manufacturing context, but there's a lot of takeaways that also apply to software or climate or any other company.
Yeah, I think just spending time, like Allison keeps alluding to, like understanding your context is going to be really important there. Like if you're working on, like I spent a bunch of time working on a company that was helping utilities run energy efficiency programs. And I like just sort of some of that information about our actual application percolated in. But as I actually went to like proactively go and learn about the concept, I felt much better informed to make better decisions at higher levels. I think a good last question here is from Abhishek. They're saying, how should I differentiate myself from other people doing software engineering in climate technology? I think this is touching back on a lot of our themes that we've talked about, like know the area, network in the sense of like being curious and actually learning from people. I think taking courses is a good idea from my super biased point of view. I do run a course with Pterodactyl, so actually Allison has taken a course from Pterodactyl, so maybe she can give some perspective on that. It's just anything that you can do on anything that you can be on your resume or in that person's brain who's making the hiring decision, or making the decision to refer you to the person making the hiring decision, that can make them think, yeah, this is more likely to be the person for this job, right? Mm-hmm. What's that going to take?
Yeah, there's something else that made me think of. There's this blog by Heidi Lim, which is also like this blog in particular is about how she like took a career break and like went about picking her job in climate. But one thing she mentioned doing during her job search was she just like went really in depth on a bunch of different like carbon capture approaches, and she wrote this like huge blog about it. And I think it just was like really well received on LinkedIn, and it also helped her actually get her job. So yeah, I think a really big fan of like sharing what you're learning as you're learning it. It's a bit scary, but I think it really helps like put out what you're thinking about. And also like when I was looking for my job, I would do like mini posts where it's also like kind of cringe to like share on LinkedIn, but I felt like that really helped. So then when I finally was like, okay, I'm looking for a job, everyone was like, oh, I know exactly what she's interested in. A lot more people were like giving me good leads. So yeah.
Also, Allison, I'm curious of when you took the course, so you made a conscious choice of, I want to go into more of a climate tech role. I'm going to take this course. What did you feel like you got out of that course?
Oh, I feel like a big thing, they have like a mentorship program where I think you work with, like, you can maybe talk to 1 to 2 mentors during the program. And also they give like a bunch of different guest lectures. So there's one that it was just a guy giving his whole like career workshop, including like how to structure your resume to be more like action based. Here, I sent this in the last panel, Jason. This is like the list of all the resources I did when I was looking for a climate job. But I think I put the slides in the video for that like resume workshop. Also,
Speaking
there
of
was one about
sharing what you're learning.
yeah, there's
Reach.
also like a climate justice workshop that was really, really cool. So I think it was like all the talks, like you get to see the actual companies people are working at. You get to like start your network early, and also you get to learn all different aspects of the climate solutions. Because even just like before that class, I thought I'd read a lot of books, but there's a big jump from that to like seeing how people are thinking who are actually in this space. So yeah.
A lot to that and say, like, I've mentioned this earlier, which is you can just do things, right? Like if you want to sell heat pumps, just start calling people and selling them in heat pumps. If you want to work in software engineering, like, so to self-promote a bit, this is what I did when I first started to get my first job ever in coding. I had no internships, I had no experience, my degree wasn't even related. What I did was I looked at companies I wanted to work for. I looked at what was wrong with their app or website, and I just coded them a feature and then like cold emailed that to the CEO and was like, hey, here's a feature I built for you. It improves this app in X, Y, or Z way. I'd love to interview and potentially work for you. And then I just did that like every day for like 6 months until I got my job. I did a write-up. I'll share it in the chat as well.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, that's a great way to like, how do you show people that you have what they want? Just make it for them. Put it where they can't ignore it. Very cool. Tarun is asking if it's possible to reach out to us on LinkedIn or email. I would totally love to have some LinkedIn connections here, just especially if you connect, put a note on your connect request. That'll help me know who you are. Yeah, sometimes they don't know what they want. Yeah, totally. All right. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Cynthia, is there anything you want to do to close up before we go?
No, thank you. I mean, I'll do the pitch for both the LFA, which is the course Allison took, Learning for Action, and the software course, but I've already put those links in the chat. So
Cool.
maybe I'll just highlight that they come with 20% discounts if you sign up with those links. So
Ooh, you sent the good links.
But appreciate everyone being here and appreciate your time.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Allison,
everyone, for
Hannan, and Bill.
coming.
Have a good week, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
enjoy
Yeah,
coming.
feel free to reach out.
See
Please do.
you.